A little over a year ago, I made the move I'd always dreamed of, bidding farewell to the hustle and bustle of a tiny town and settling in a remote valley nestled in the heart of nowhere, surrounded by a vast national forest and a handful of neighbors. It was the isolation I craved, a haven for my outdoor-loving soul. At that point in my life, I had spent 5 or 6 years working as a paramedic, blending my passion for the outdoors with civic-mindedness by volunteering with a local search and rescue organization. We were a small, poorly funded group, yet surprisingly busy. Over the 9 years I spent with them, our weekends were a whirlwind of rescues, one after another, especially during the spring through fall seasons. Our primary stomping grounds were the poorly maintained fire trails, spanning roughly 100 miles, immensely popular with dirt bike and quad enthusiasts. Their misadventures, getting lost, wrecked, or injured, became our call to action. Armed with my Boy Scout and paramedic training, I joined the ranks with zero expectations beyond the desire to help. About 2 weeks into my volunteer stint, I received my first call. A group of dirt bikers from the city had lost one of their own. For reasons unbeknownst to me, they had stationed their least experienced rider at the rear of the pack of a dozen or so bikers. They returned to the trailhead after 4 hours, only to realize the inexperienced rider was missing. After futile attempts to locate him on foot for another 4 or 5 hours, they dialed 911, setting in motion a series of events that would leave me grappling with the unexplainable. Our response time from the 911 call to assembling a squad at the trailhead was impressive, a mere 20 or 30 minutes. However, the delay in the actual search put us significantly behind the curve. A quick briefing, distribution of maps, division into teams, and we set off into the vast woods. I found myself on a quad with the most seasoned team member, heading out on one of the longer trails that encircled the area. The trails, I quickly discovered, were not the dirt roads through the woods I had envisioned. Instead, they were a nightmare, rugged, technical, and utterly confusing. GPS signals were sporadic, radios and cell phones unreliable, and the maps provided a mere semblance of the chaotic reality. For hours into the search, I was covered in mud, bleeding from countless encounters with branches, and utterly exhausted. I was ready to call it quits. During a much-needed water break, broken radio chatter and the news of the missing biker being found reached us. We rushed to the location, only to find abandoned bikes and quads, and the somber sight of our missing person lying lifeless in the woods. His lips were blue, skin dusky, arms spread like a cross. His wide-open eyes, on closer inspection, were covered in fly eggs. He had been dead for a while, a stark contrast to the well-equipped bike with ample supplies of gas, water, and food. A healthy guy in his late 20s, dead inexplicably in the heart of the forest. We wrapped him in blankets, secured him to a Stokes basket, and transported him back to the trailhead, where the coroner awaited. A week later, my curiosity got the better of me, and I approached the coroner, seeking answers. The cause of death, determined by the pathologist, was cardiac dysrhythmia secondary to extreme anxiety. The man had died of fright, a revelation that shook my preconceived notions shaped by Hollywood dramatization. Yet, the mysteries persisted. What was going through his mind as he ventured into the woods? Was it fear of the wilderness, the terror of being lost? If so, why abandon the trail and run blindly into the unknown? Part of me couldn't help but consider the possibility that he had encountered something out there, something beyond the realm of rational explanation. I've heard countless tales of strange occurrences in the woods, and having witnessed a few myself, I can't dismiss the idea. This story remains a head-scratcher, an enigma that has lingered, unsolved, in the recesses of my mind. As I ventured into the heart of the Appalachian Trail, the culmination of months of planning and anticipation, an exhilarating sense of freedom enveloped me. The crisp, untainted air and the breathtaking beauty of the wilderness were a balm for my weary soul. I relished the adventure, each step immersing me further into the natural wonders that surrounded me. My backpack, laden with essentials, held the promise of nights spent under the starlit canopy. I reveled in the solitude, finding solace in the rustling leaves and the gentle whispers of the wind. Hiking and camping had always been my refuge, my escape from the mundanity of everyday life, and in that moment, I felt truly in my element. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow on the sprawling forest, an abrupt change in the atmosphere seized me. The temperature plummeted, and an eerie stillness replaced the once serene ambience. It was as if the very air around me had thickened with an unspoken foreboding. A primal instinct tingled at the base of my spine, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I dismissed the unsettling sensation, attributing it to my overactive imagination. Yet, as I pressed on, the unease intensified. The woods, once tranquil, now echoed with an unsettling energy. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and a haunting dread loomed over me. With the onset of dusk, I decided it was time to set up camp. I discovered a small clearing, quickly pitching my tent and kindling a fire for warmth. The crackling flames danced in the darkness, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to flicker with a life of their own. Despite my efforts to shake off the unease, a disquiet settled in the pit of my stomach. As I lay in my sleeping bag, the nocturnal symphony of the forest played its soothing melody. Yet, amidst the natural sounds, an ominous presence manifested. Faint footsteps encircled my tent, deliberate and heavy. My rational mind attempted to dismiss them as the wandering of a nocturnal creature, but the more I listened, the more I recognized an unsettling truth: they were too deliberate, too methodical to belong to any ordinary animal. A sense of vulnerability gripped me, intensifying with every passing moment. The footsteps persisted throughout the night, an unrelenting reminder of an unseen watcher. Sleep eluded me, and by the first light of dawn, exhaustion weighed heavily on my weary frame. Deciding to forge ahead, I packed up my camp, eager to distance myself from the haunting presence that lingered in the shadows. Yet, as I resumed my trek, an unsettling realization dawned: the footsteps persisted, louder and more frenetic than before. Panic seized me as I quickened my pace, the unseen pursuer seemingly matching my every stride. The forest, once a source of solace, now closed in around me, the footsteps growing louder, echoing from all directions. My heart raced, breath quickened, and an otherworldly terror gripped me. I dared not look back, fearing what I might find, but the unseen pursuer closed in with a relentless determination. In a desperate bid to escape, I broke into a run, my footsteps drowning in the cacophony of the unseen stalker. Breathless and disoriented, I stumbled, my surroundings a blur of fear. As I fell to the forest floor, the unseen pursuer's breath, cold and damp, grazed the nape of my neck. With eyes tightly shut, I awaited an inevitable fate, but then, as abruptly as it had begun, the footsteps ceased. I cautiously opened my eyes, finding myself alone once more, surrounded by the serene beauty of the forest. The only sound was the echo of my own trembling breath. I rose, limbs trembling with fear, and resumed my journey, vowing to bury the harrowing encounter deep within. The footsteps may have faded, but their haunting echoes lingered, a constant reminder of the unexplainable terror that lurked deep within the Appalachian Trail. For years, the dream of hiking the Trans-American Trail had been etched in my mind since my teenage days, back when the allure of trekking through the wilderness captivated my adventurous spirit. The journey finally unfolded as I embarked on the trail, armed with a backpack filled with essentials, ready to immerse myself in the breathtaking beauty of the American landscape. The initial hours were filled with the joy of discovery, but soon, subtle signs hinted at an eerie atmosphere. As I continued, the unsettling feeling intensified, leading me to a clearing in the woods that, at first glance, seemed like a serene spot to set up camp. However, my excitement turned to dread as I noticed strange symbols and markings on the ground, some seemingly adorned with dried blood. The air was thick with an unsettling foreboding, amplified by totems crafted from bones and sticks. My unease peaked when I stumbled upon a group of people draped in long robes, their faces concealed, engaged in an unsettling chant. The words were foreign and guttural, echoing through the clearing. A sense of impending doom enveloped me, and I knew I had to leave. The realization felt cliché, akin to scenes from horror movies, but the urgency was undeniable. Attempting to retreat, I caught the attention of one of the cult members. The chanting ceased as they approached, their intense gaze rendering me immobile. Their words, spoken in an incomprehensible tongue, fueled my fear. A growing chorus of voices joined in, and my attempts to escape proved futile. It was as if an unseen force held me captive, their eyes emitting a strange, hypnotic light. As the cult closed in, my heart raced, the grip of fear tightening. Suddenly, a blinding flash of white light enveloped the clearing, and in an instant, everything vanished. The cult, the symbols, and the eerie atmosphere dissipated, leaving me alone with nothing but the echoes of my frantic breaths and sobs. Without looking back, I sprinted towards the safety of my car, miles away. The reality of what transpired lingered, a brush with something malevolent, perhaps extraterrestrial, paranormal, or interdimensional. The trail's allure had been shattered, replaced by an indelible memory of fear and horror. If anyone reading this has insights into what I experienced, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Wandering through the majestic Cascade Mountains has always been a source of solace for me. The crisp mountain air, towering trees, and breathtaking views never fail to leave me in awe. Today was no different as I made my way up the trail, basking in the tranquility that enveloped me. Little did I know that my sense of peace would soon be shattered by an encounter with a creature I thought had become a relic of the past in these parts, a mountain lion. As I continued along the trail, a subtle unease began to gnaw at me. Something felt off, and as I turned a bend, there it was, a mountain lion, crouched low to the ground, its eyes fixed on me. My heart began to pound with anxiety. I had read about what to do in such situations, but applying that knowledge in the heat of the moment proved to be a daunting task. Instinctively, I knew I needed to make myself look bigger, make loud noises to scare it off. I lifted my arms above my head, hoping to appear as large as possible, and began to shout and clap my hands. However, the mountain lion remained unmoved, its eyes unwavering and seemingly soulless. Suddenly, like a bat out of hell, it lunged towards me, teeth bared. I stumbled backward, barely managing to avoid its attack. The gravity of the situation hit me as my heart raced faster. This wasn't a warning, the mountain lion was genuinely trying to kill me. Desperation set in, and I attempted to back away slowly, but the mountain lion was relentless, closing in with astonishing speed. I could feel the hot breath on my face as it growled and snarled, inches away from me. My heart pounded so hard that I feared it might burst out of my chest. Again, I tried to retreat, but I tripped on a rock, falling to the ground. This was my worst nightmare unfolding, and I was in a perilous position. The sharp pain surged through me as the mountain lion sunk its teeth into my arm. I screamed, hoping someone, anyone, would hear me. But the only response was the mountain lion's angry growls. The realization hit me that I might not make it out of this alive if I didn't act swiftly. Frantically searching for a lifeline, I spotted a nearby rock. I seized it and struck the mountain lion with all my strength. It seemed to yell in pain, releasing its grip on me just long enough for me to scramble to my feet and run for my life. Yet, the relentless predator was not done with me. It chased after me, its powerful legs propelling it forward at an incredible speed. Once again, I felt its hot breath on my back as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest. After what seemed like an eternity, a glimmer of hope appeared, the outline of a ranger station in the distance. I sprinted towards it, praying that someone would be there to help me. As I burst through the door, I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air, trying to calm down enough to explain what had just transpired. The ranger promptly called for an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. My arms and legs were adorned with deep cuts, and bruises covered my body. Yet, I was alive, a fact I couldn't help but be grateful for. That day in the Cascade Mountains marked the scariest experience of my life. The memory of the mountain lion's teeth sinking into me is etched in my mind. I harbor no grudge against wild animals. I'm not haunted by fear of bears or mountain lions. Instead, I view it as a stark reminder to be cautious, vigilant, and always carry some form of protection, especially in the form of spray, a steadfast ally in the face of nature's unpredictable challenges. I was 22 years old when it all went down. Up until then, I'd never ventured out of my home state, but with Verona raging, my friends and I decided to take an impromptu trip. We weren't exactly pandemic savvy, and the allure of adventure was too strong to resist. For privacy's sake, let's call my buddies Mike, Brittany, Taylor, and myself Raven. We were an eclectic group, drawn together by a shared fascination with the paranormal, cryptids, demonology, you name it. I had been practicing the craft since I was 13, and our interests in the bizarre bonded us. Our destination was Point Place, West Virginia, with a plan to eventually make our way to Pennsylvania. We hit the Mothman Museum, and everything seemed like a blast. The locals tipped us off about abandoned bunkers on some trails off the beaten path, and, being the thrill-seekers we were, we decided to check them out during the day. It was all laughs, hikes, and typical tourist activities, spray painting our names in a bunker and whatnot. But things took a turn when we decided to return to the trails at night. The woods seemed denser, and an eerie quiet settled over us. We stumbled upon what looked like a summoning or sacrificial circle inside one bunker, candles, wax, and what seemed like blood. We wanted no part in it, so we kept walking. As we went deeper, the woods fell silent, and suddenly, from the thick forest, we heard Mike's voice calling to us. The catch? Mike was right in front of us, and his mouth never moved. Panic set in, and I booked it back to the van with Taylor and Brittany. Mike, curious as ever, lagged behind, and none of us saw what mimicked his voice. No explanation was offered, and to this day, it remains a mystery. Days passed without incident in West Virginia, and we eventually reached Pennsylvania. Our first night in a hotel was uneventful, but things took a strange turn the next day when we set up camp near a cold river. The forest was alive with sounds, and we thought we had found a perfect spot. Little did we know, the strange occurrences were far from over. We decided to hike up a mountain, splitting into two groups with walkie-talkies for communication. Brittany and Mike took one path, while Taylor and I took the other. The woods felt heavy, an uncomfortable silence enveloping us. As we regrouped, we heard Mike's voice on the walkie-talkie, reporting strange findings. We dismissed it and continued until Brittany, in pain from her hip, and I decided to stay back. The eerie silence returned, broken only by a strange grunting sound nearby. Taylor and Mike eventually reunited, but Taylor's recount of his experience sent shivers down our spines. He heard my voice, emotionless and taunting, calling him deeper into the woods. Panic overtook him, and he ran blindly down the mountain, not knowing where he was. When he finally reached the van, he was shaking and vomiting, his fear palpable. As we tried to comfort Taylor, the unsettling realization hit us: Mike hadn't returned yet. We radioed him, and after what felt like an eternity, he responded, oblivious to the terror that had just unfolded. We left the area swiftly, with Taylor still shaken and haunted by nightmares of a beast with antlers chasing and attacking him. I'm 24 now, but the memories of that trip linger, especially in Taylor's nightmares. We learned the hard way that when you go looking for the unknown, it might find you, and uttering its name even once could draw its attention.